Good evening, friends and fellow Malaysians. Thank you for attending this memorial event in remembrance of the late Saudara Karpal Singh. Lebih dahulu, saudara dan saudari, saya ingin menjemput semua berdiri, bertafakur selama 1 minit untuk memperingati mendiang Saudara Karpal Singh. 我请各位起立，以对已故的卡巴辛先生呢做出1分钟的默哀。Thank you. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, it is truly gratifying to see so many of you who are present here, inside and outside of the hall. Whether you have come from near or far, we are all gathered here tonight for the same reason, to pay tribute to the life of a towering Malaysian who has contributed immensely to our nation. The passing of Saudara Karpal Singh is still fresh in our memory. Many tears have been shed in the last 1 week over his untimely demise, as many Malaysians from all walks of life, regardless of race and religions, have grieved over this great loss of the nation. But ladies and gentlemen, although we are still saddened by Saudara Karpal's passing, however, at the same time, we have many reasons to celebrate his extraordinary life. Ladies and gentlemen, for over 40 years, Saudara Karpal Singh had spoken and acted without fear and favor. As a lawyer and member of parliament in the cause of justice, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, that is why we have the deepest respect and admiration for all that he has fought and stood for throughout his life in the interest of all Malaysians. For this reason, he is fondly and famously known as the Tiger of Jelutong, and fittingly so. Saudara Karpal has always been the nightmare of Barisan Nasional when he was alive. Even after his departure, the BN government is so afraid and so scared that they banned our venue supposedly assigned to hold tonight's memorial service at a public school hall. And this is why we beg your pardon for not able to provide you a bigger hall, because the Chinese primary school hall in Jalan Lok Yew can accommodate number of participants at least double. The insensitive and the unreasonable attitude unbecoming of a government. And it also shows that the roar of the tiger of Jelutong still terrifying Barisan Nasional. Shame on BN. As many Malaysians can attest, Saudara Karpal has gone the extra mile to speak out for and uphold the weak and the poor in our society, especially those who could not afford legal representation and sought his assistance. Through his fearless, generous and courageous advocacy, he had defended the rights of many Malaysians in the long and illustrious career in the legal arena. In Parliament and in State Assembly, his voice was often heard the loudest, boldly speaking out on issues affecting the nation and bringing the BN government to account over its bad governance and abuse of power. Despite enduring many setbacks and persecution by the BN government over the years, Saudara Karpal remained steadfast and true to his conviction. As we all know, he was unfairly detained under the Internal Security Act during the Operasi Lalang and was unjustly prosecuted under the Sedition Act for speaking the truth. A lesser man would surely not be able to withstand such prosecution, but not Saudara Karpal. No adversity or opposition could break his resolve and his iron will in pursuit of justice and freedom for all Malaysians. And that speaks volume of the character of this great man. And it is precisely the reason why we are all here this evening, to pay tribute and to remember his achievements and sacrifices, his unrivaled courage, outstanding bravery, and exemplary life, and the shining legacy that he has left behind for us in his lifelong quest for a better Malaysia. Saudara Karpal's selfless and courageous life has captured the imagination of countless Malaysians, for he has clearly demonstrated what it means to be a true and principled Malaysian, one who walks the talk without fail and always putting the interests of others and the nation above his own self. Truly, Saudara Karpal's unwavering spirit and deep commitment to a just, free, and democratic Malaysia is a shining example to us. It is my hope that each of us here this evening will be inspired to carry on his legacy, to rise above ourselves and be a beacon of light to continue his good fight for our nation. Although he is no longer with us, Saudara Karpal will always live on in our hearts as we honor this extraordinary and great man. Finally, in remembrance of Saudara Karpal's sacrifices and to fulfill his dream of a better Malaysia, we in DAP promise that we will do the best in the next general election to end the hegemony of the party of crooks and thieves and tyrants. Allow me to speak a few sentences in Mandarin. 各位同胞，感谢大家的到来。卡巴信的离世，举国哀悼。他的逝世是国家和人民无可弥补的大损失。卡巴信坚强奋斗超过40年。 他一生为了促进马来西亚的民主人权、自由平等、司法公正、肃贪倡廉，可以说已经做出了最大的无私的奉献和付出。他既恭尽瘁，死而后已。 各位同胞，卡巴信崇高的气节、道德原则，是所有从政者的典范。他爱国爱民，也忧国忧民，对吗？各位。 卡巴信一生中为国家人民而奋斗，但是他也一生中遭遇了各种的打压。他曾经在内安法令下被扣留一段不短的时期，他也经常 面对来自国政的种种的迫害，但是他还是能够继续的奋勇自前，始终威武不屈。因为他有坚定不移的信念，他有不折不挠的斗志，因为 他有一个重要的做人原则：士可杀，不可辱。各位同胞，卡巴信对国家和人民所付出的牺牲，已经为马来西亚 带来多少的曙光？这就是卡巴信的精神。卡巴信精神发挥的光辉，将能够受到世世代代、千千万万人民的敬仰。卡巴信永远都不会在马来西亚的历史中 消失，他还永远的被这一代人和未来的马来西亚人民所深深的铭记在心。各位同胞，我在这里要代表行动党的同志，向卡巴信 许下一个承诺，这个承诺就是在下一届大选，我们将会全力以赴，以便确保国政的这个霸权将会在下一届大选被结束。这是卡巴信的心愿，是民主行动党的目标，是马来西亚全体人民的期待，实现改朝换代。感谢大家，我们也祝卡巴信同志安息。Oh, one more thing. Sorry, I would also like to express gratitude to the late Mr. Michael Cornelius, the unsung hero. Who stood by and looked after Saudara Karpal Singh, rain or shine. Michael was at Saudara Karpal's side day and night after Karpal was wheelchair bound after an automobile accident. He has served well, and without him, Karpal would not have been possible to continue to serve as the voice of the voiceless until their last moments. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gobind Singh, Chief Minister of Penang, Exco of the DAP, thank you very much for having given me an opportunity to speak to you this evening, to be here with you to share in this moment. Like many of you, I'm trying to make sense as well of the tragedy that took place last week. I think it'll be some time before we'll be in a position to reconcile, but I think events like this help that process along. So allow me to begin by expressing my heartfelt condolences to the family of the late Mr. Karpal Singh, represented here by Mr. Gobind. Now you'll hear a lot this evening about the politics of the man, the courage of the man. And I was wondering how I would be able to contribute to what was going to be said this evening in memory of that great man, Mr. Karpal Singh. And I think the best I can say is this, that above everything, Mr. Karpal was always a friend of my family. I grew up with his children, became their schoolmates in secondary school. First Jagdeep, a year below me, then Gobind, Ram, and Sangeet, quite far down that line. Man Karpal was a little too far behind. We treated each other's houses as our own. We were close enough for our respective mothers to scold us all, regardless. There was no discrimination there. I describe this to you not as a mark of distinction, nor as a source of pride, but rather as a means to say that the man I came to know, that I came to love dearly, was always simply Uncle Karpal. As a young boy, he was a towering presence, larger than life. That man on the posters, on the back of the jeeps, vans, and lorries that carried him on his election campaigns like chariots. The walls of the boys' rooms, Gobind and Jagdeep, were filled with cutouts of his exploits. And I'm talking about the time when we were maybe 12, 13. And of course, there were the Lat cartoons that Uncle Karpal regularly featured in. His was that comforting presence to the family that, though often absent, because he was away at work, or away in Parliament, or away on cases, he was nonetheless cherished, even if it involved some of the strangest pranks that one could play, and he did on us when he returned. Very, very strange. In him, we had an ally, not just someone who would protect us from the wrath of our mothers when we created trouble, but someone who would quite happily get involved in the mischief we were brewing if he had the chance. And he often did. And he was not averse to getting down and dirty with the boys if he had to. And he did. Funnily enough, to us at that time, it seemed like the most normal thing in the world. This world-class advocate, fearless defender of human rights, parliamentarian, it was perfectly normal for this man to be getting wholly involved in the childishness his sons and I were more than happy to engage in every chance we got. And really, I think the best thing I can say about him is that he was the coolest person I knew when it came to it. Maybe it was because we, or maybe I, didn't quite understand the true nature of events that were unfolding. Those became apparent in 1987. I was in Singapore for my A-levels when I got that phone call telling us that Uncle Karpal had been detained with Saudara Lim Kit Siang, Saudara Lim Guan Eng, Saudara Mat Sabu, and all the others. It was a trying time, and I can't quite erase from memory the tragedy that befell the family as they came to struggle with what it is that obvious wrong that had been done to their father or their husband. I knew by then that I would become a lawyer. I knew too that I wanted as much as possible to be able to fight the causes that I believed in. It's only with his passing and the benefit of introspection that I've come to realize how much he had influenced that choice of mine, how much of a role model he had been in his own very quiet but very dignified way. And maybe because of that, I would like to focus this evening on Mr. Karpal, the lawyer. I spent some time today meandering through the list of reported cases that Karpal handled. There were almost 1,000, according to the current Law Journal database. His achievements, and it did not matter whether he won or lost the case, that was decided on the facts, as lawyers know. He more usually than not won the point of law. His achievements in the case books of this country are like a roadmap to the evolution of criminal and constitutional law in this country. The right of accused persons to counsel, to the principles underlying the granting of habeas corpus, the standard of proof in criminal cases, the powers of the monarchs and the constitutional framework that govern us, the democratic underpinnings of our electoral system, the fundamental liberties of citizens, the secular nation, status of this nation. These and many other principles he helped clarify through the courts. These signpost our nation's journey through the 4 decades that he was a member of the bar. And if there's one thing that I can say in this time, in this day, that makes me proud to still be a member of the Malaysian bar, it is the memory of Mr. Karpal Singh. It did not matter that he was constantly besieged in one way or the other. It did not matter that the disappointments were many. He held an unshakable belief in the validity of the system, its value. He had faith in our constitutional system and measured his value by how he could contribute to that system as a lawyer. In all the tributes from lawyers and judges that have poured in since his untimely passing, the narrative has been one of an ethical, gentlemanly advocate who was skilled and appreciated the nature of the adversarial process. As I read through his cases this afternoon, I was humbled. The practice of law in this country has become more of a challenge with each passing year. More increasingly, those of us who appear in the courts ask what value we bring to the process, to our clients. But challenging as it is for us, was it any less challenging for those who preceded us? That was the question that confronted me this afternoon. Karpal had to face Operasi Lalang, the constitutional crisis of 1988 and its terrible impact on the judiciary and the legal system. He had to face the 1998 trials of Anwar Ibrahim, the scandals that the V.K. Lingam Royal Commission brought into focus, amongst many other things. He was unfaltering unwavering in his commitment to his duties as lawyer, citizen, and statesman. It does not mean that he was not frustrated. In the last few years, I began to spend much more time in the appellate courts. There, lawyers spend many hours waiting to be called up. It gave me a chance to talk to him, lawyer to lawyer, though in all honesty, it was difficult not to revert to that fidgety child he probably remembered and thought of me as. But the one thing that came through consistently was that we could not give up. We had to soldier on for the betterment of the profession, of the nation. It reminded me of what Raja Aziz Adrus, another towering Malaysian, used to say. We have to keep on knocking our heads against that door. One day, it will open, and some light will shine through. That is the legacy that Karpal has left us. That is the sacred trust that we carry in his memory. He asked for nothing and gave of himself wholly. Let me end with an image painted in words by William Blake. I've borrowed one stanza. Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? And I say, farewell, Tiger of Jelutong.
Pengerusi, Saudara Kobin, Saudara Lim Kit Siang, saudara-saudara. I have never met Karpal Singh. Kami tidak pernah berjumpa. Tapi ketika saya disoal siasat, nama Karpal Singh telah diajukan oleh Special Branch kepada saya. I've never met Karpal Singh, but when I was interrogated by the Special Branch before they sent me to Kamunting, the name of Karpal Singh appeared. This is because ini kerana saudara Karpal Singh cuba mengajukan habeas corpus kepada bakal-bakal tahanan ISA. This is because Karpal Singh is going to propose that the detainee should apply for habeas corpus. Kemudian saya menulis sebuah teater bilik sulit, dan I wrote a secret chambers, sejarah apa yang berlaku di dalam soal siasat. Act pertama, the first act of that play, which just came back after 1-month tour United Kingdom, was about Karpal Singh. Saya tidak tahu ini akan berlaku. Kemudian saya menulis sajak ini untuk ditujukan kepada saudara Karpal yang tidak ada lagi bersama kita. Saudaraku, kau telah pergi, kau gugur dalam perjalanan, kau gugur dalam tugas, kau gugur menegak keadilan. Lalu menangislah anak segala bangsa, lalu menangis tahanan dalam penjara, lalu menangis isteri yang suaminya akan digantung, lalu menangis ibu yang anaknya dalam lokap, lalu menangis perlembagaan persekutuan tanpa peguam datang membela. Matahari menjadi gersang, hujan turun di tengah hari, menangis kau yang tiada lagi. Karpal Singh, oh Karpal Singh, kau menjunjung ubur perlembagaan, kau pejuang rakyat tertindas, kau penegak keadilan, kau dinobatkan harimau jelutong, oh Karpal Singh. Saudaraku, terimalah salam ini dari aku, terimalah selamat jalan ini dari aku, terimalah 1000 suara, terimalah 1000 laungan, kau anak Malaysia, kau pemangkin sejarah keadilan, kau dinobat harimau jelutong, kaulah wira anak semua bangsa. Kapal Singh, oh Kapal Singh, kau menjunjung obor perlembagaan persekutuan, kau perjuang rakyat tertindas, kau penegak keadilan, kau dinobatkan harimau jelutung. My dear brothers, you left us. You left us in the journey to uphold justice. We all cried for you. The earth cried for you. The mother in the prison cried for you. The children in the prison cried for you. Perlembagaan persekutuan cried because there's no more lawyers to defend you. The sun stopped shining. The rain started to fall in midday, crying because you have left us. Karpal Singh, oh Karpal Singh, you upheld the Malaysian Constitution. You are for the people. You are for justice. You are harimau jelutung. My dear brother, please receive my salam. Please receive my selamat tinggal from 100 voices, from hundreds people, children of all nations. You are a historical man. You will always be remembered. Karpal Singh, oh Karpal Singh, kau menjunjung obor perlembagaan, kau perjuang rakyat tertindas, kau penegak keadilan, kau dinobatkan harimau jelutung. And now the song. Ning Jidan. Ning.
Selamat malam, kawan-kawan. Lagu ini ditujukan buat mendiang kapal. Oh, dia tak nampak. Oh, sorry. Saudaraku, kau telah pergi, kau gugur dalam perjalanan, kau gugur di dalam tugas, kau gugur menegak keadilan, lalu menangis anak segala bangsa. Lalu menangis tahanan dalam penjara. Lalu menangislah perlembagaan persekutuan tanpa peguam datang membela. Matahari menjadi gersang, hujan turun di tengah hari, menangisi kau yang tiada lagi, menangisi engkau yang tiada lagi. kelembagaan, kau pejuang rakyat yang tertindas, kau penegak keadilan. Kau dinobatkan harimau, harimau jelutung, kau dinobatkan harimau jelutung. Saudaraku, terimalah salam dariku, terimalah selamat jalan ini untukmu. Terimalah 1000 suara, terimalah 1000 laungan. Kapal Singh, oh kapal Singh, kaulah anak Malaysia, kaulah pemangkin sejarah bangsa, kaulah harimau, harimau jelutung, kau dinobatkan harimau jelutung. Kaulah anak Malaysia, kaulah harimau, harimau jelutung. Kau dinobatkan harimau, harimau jelutung. Kau dinobatkan harimau jelutung. Terima kasih.
A very good evening, everyone. My dear Gobind, members of Karpal Singh family, Saudara Lim Kit Siang, Guan Eng, and all the comrades of Karpal Singh. It's a real honor today for me to be here, and I know that the passing of Karpal Singh is a passing of a people's hero. But we're here today to celebrate the life and the work of this hero. Karpal hailed from a generation who were unafraid to fight for a fairer and just world. He was one of those who had the tenacity to see their principles true to the very end. Like all moral heroes, they were unbreakable. A fiercely uncompromising warrior for social justice and human freedom, Karpal embodied what is most brave and noble in the human spirit. The immense outpouring of grief across the country at the news of his passing and at his funeral is evidence of the impact that he has had on so many people's lives and of his great spirit, and on the countless ways in which he has contributed across gender, class, age, race, and ideology. He was a freedom fighter, one who loved and dearly loved by the people. Karpal was also one of those very rare human beings who inspired admiration and respect from both friends and foe for the type of work and the life that he has lived. And in fact, my daughter Pauline, who is here, when she wrote about the fearless tiger and the freedom fighter, said that his roar was the voice of the country's buried conscience. Karpal was a humanist and a defender of justice, whose principles were not simply defined by party politics, but rather they were universal. And I, coming from the United Nations as the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, am so pleased that many of his values are actually values of the UN Charter. My daughter Lillian, who is in London, wanted me to say that to share with you what she wanted to say about him. She said, Uncle Karpal believed in the fundamental equality of all human beings before the law. He believed that all individuals must have equal access to justice. He believed in the rule of law. But he also believed that laws can be manipulated by the powerful and by those in power. Therefore, the rule of law must be founded on the bedrock of core values like human rights and freedom and justice. Karpal was a giant of a man who fought against all odds to bring justice to all, regardless of race and class. He and my late husband, Fan Yu Teng, that many of you know and I know love, shared a very rich history and a vision for a better and fairer Malaysia. My husband Fan admired Karpal greatly to the very end of his life and always considered him a dear friend and one of the most principled men he had ever encountered. On his dying bed, when I gave Fan Yu Teng a copy of the article on the tiger of Jeluntong, my husband Fan roared with delight. Because he was very pleased that he contributed to actually bringing Karpal to run for the first elections in Kedah. The last time when I saw Karpal, he spoke so warmly and so graciously at Fan's memorial just over 3 years ago. And I must say that he told that story of how he was, in a sense, almost hook-winged to run for the parliamentary seat because Fan refused to pick up the phone when Karpal tried to change his mind. And thank God for that. Let me end by a quote from Martin Luther King. And he said that the arc of justice is long. The arc of morality is long, but it bends towards the side of justice. And I just want to say, with two heroes like Fan Yu Teng, Karpal Singh, and so many moral heroes sitting on the arc, on the side of justice, that arc will bend because they also sit at the heart of God. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rakan-rakan kuasawan di hadapan saya sastrawan saja. Saya ingin mulanya untuk memberitahu, saya sempat bertemu dengan mendiang Karpal Singh, seingat saya hanya 4 kali. 2 kali di mahkamah, 2 kali lagi waktu dalam acara tertentu. Saya lebih banyak jumpa dia dalam surat kabar, bukan di luar. Tapi saya merasakan bahwasanya seorang seperti dia telah memberikan usia, tenaga untuk mewaraskan Malaysia yang tidak waras. Dan khusus untuknya, dengan sedikit agak susah payah, saya sempat menulis sebuah puisi yang akan saya bacakan. Bagi pertama kali. Belum pernah dibacakan di mana-mana, belum pernah disiarkan di mana-mana. Dan puisi ini saya judulkan Elegi Seorang Pemberani kepada Karpal Singh. Sesekali bila Wira mapan pergi, membekal pesan waras, pedas dan murni, terbisik suara seranum-ranumnya, lalu gemahnya jadi benih sejarah. Bila merpati terbang dan kuntum kembang, waktu buku siasa cermat terbentang, tertitislah pesan yang waras dan mesra, yang tidak mudah dikisi abjadnya. Memang harimau yang garang telah pergi, tapi ditinggalkannya belang yang sakti. Dirinya obor benderang bagi bangsa, makin marak menyala merangsang kita. Kini, bolehkah didengar bisik syahdu merangkul teteman bukannya seteru? Bolehkah hajat yang ramah bersaudara, tali yang tak putus, air yang tak tertumpah? Memang sebuah obor tiba padam, tapi marak semula dalam ingatan. Kita tak akan kekok sambut tangannya, kerana tangan itu harum muhibah. Memang harimau nan garang telah pergi, tapi disemaikan semangat berani. Dirinya obor benderang bagi bangsa, makin marak menyala mencabar kita. Sekian.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Samad, for such a wonderful poem.
Terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada saudara pengurusi majlis yang saya hormati, yang amat berhormat Ketua Menteri Pulau Pinang, Saudara Lim Guan Eng, yang saya hormati Saudara Lim Kit Siang, Dr. Nolin hadir malam ini, Dato' Ambiga, Imtiaz, Saudara Mat Sabu, Deputy Chairman, Saudara Tan Kok Wai, semua yang berhormat yang hadir. Minta maaf saya tidak sebut nama satu persatu. Last week, at this time, I was visited by a tiger. My father met me in Kuala Lumpur before he left for Penang. You never know that is the last time you would meet someone. And so, you are really never ready to lose them. He left my room at about 10:30 Tuesday night. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was told that there was an accident. My wife came to see me in hospital. She didn't know what to say. She looked at me and she just broke down and cried. At that time, I was told that 2 members of my family had died. We did not know what had actually happened, and of course, I informed my elder brother and my mother, and we rushed to Karpal mortuary. In that journey, flashes of this great man went through my mind. At that time, I received a call from the MP for Ipoh Timur, Saudara Thomas Su. He told me that my younger brother survived. But he also broke to me the news of Michael's passing. Michael was like family to us as well. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, as news broke out, many people called in disbelief, shock. Many didn't know what to say. You could sense the sadness all around you. We went to Ipoh hospital thereafter. People gathered from all walks of life. Everyone asked that one question: is it true? How could this happen? Tears flowed. Emotions ran high. And then it was the funeral. 3 days, he lay in our house in Penang. tens of thousands of people, one by one, lined up the streets outside of our house just to come in to pay their last respects. People from all walks of life, even our political opponents, everyone who came there expressed grief, sadness. It will take time before we come to terms with this loss. But ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my family, we would like to thank all Malaysians who have offered prayers, who have sent their condolences, who came to our house to pay their last respects. All of you who gave the tiger the send-off he deserved. We in our family, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Special thanks must be made to the state government of Penang. Guaneng, there's not much that I can say, but I think you know how grateful we are. Not just as Chief Minister, but as a friend of the family who stood by us, Mr. Lim Kit Siang. No words can describe. The leaders of the DAP, all of you who came to say goodbye. But ladies and gentlemen, we are now here to remember Mr. Karpal. There have been tears, as I said. But I think what is important is for us to ensure that we carry on the fight. We must rise to finish off what it is he began for this country. They thought they could break him. They tried for years to break him. They could not break him. A man who stood up to defend the constitution of this country, charged for defending the constitution of this country, convicted for defending the constitution of this country. This is the state of affairs in Malaysia today. I hope our Attorney General can grow himself a conscience. I read in the press yesterday calls for Gani Patel to consider withdrawing sedition charges against Mr. Karpal. We don't need favors from the AG. We don't need his sympathy. We won't back down. We will fight it till the end. Why? Because Mr. Karpal would have fought it to the end. So when we ask ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, why we are here tonight, let us remember the spirit of the man. I have had the privilege of knowing him all my life. I am his son. And I can say this, I thank God for having given me the privilege of having such a great father. I thank God for giving me a chance to get to know such a great man. We must carry on this fight. Throughout my years in practice with him, there was never once that he would say no to anyone who needed help. To him, it was simple. If someone comes to you in need of help, and if you are able, you should help him. It does not matter if you win, it does not matter if you lose. But the fact is, you tried. He fought hard for many years. He was detained under the ISA. He was charged for sedition in 1999. Those charges were withdrawn. In 2005, he was involved in an accident. Ladies and gentlemen, most of you here will agree that it was not easy for him thereafter. Despite his condition, he fought on. He never gave up. It was the spirit in him which I think all of us must learn from. His belief in the struggle for a Malaysian Malaysia. His belief in the struggle for a Malaysia where there is equality, fairness, and justice. We cannot stop here. We must take this fight further. I will say this. I am grateful that he was able to see victory on part of Pakatan Rakyat and DAP in 2008 and 2013. Having been opposition leader in Penang for a long time, having fought those long battles with Mr. Lim Kit Siang, and I know those were long battles because as a child I used to see what they went through. It was a real joy for him to see Penang, under the leadership of Lim Guan Eng and DAP, pass PKR in 2008. In 2013, he was very confident that we will see the same result at federal level. Unfortunately, that did not happen. But that does not mean that it cannot happen. That does not mean that we stop the fight here. For him, we must fight on. We must make sure that in the next elections, we go all out. So we can see an end of Barisan Nasional. We can see a new government in Malaysia. And I am certain that all of you here today, those in this hall, those watching proceedings live, I am sure that all of you will help me in taking my father's message across. We must be strong. The fight goes on. Jangan main-main. The tiger lives on. Thank you very much.
When God made Karpal Singh, he broke the mold. If ever there was a man who looked adversity in the eye, who battled it fearlessly, overcame it with dignity, that man is Karpal Singh. If ever there was a lawyer who was a consummate professional and a great humanitarian, that man is Karpal Singh. If ever there was an honorable man, loyal to his principles, to the rule of law and the federal constitution, that man is Karpal Singh. Like many lawyers, I knew and admired Karpal Singh as I grew up at the Malaysian bar. He was already well known as a famous lawyer who spoke out on matters others were afraid to even mention. He epitomized the raison d'etre of the Malaysian bar. In summary, in upholding the cause of justice, uninfluenced by fear or favor. At an EGM of the Malaysian Bar in 1977, it was Karpal who proposed a motion against the Essential Security Cases Regulations 1975, or ESCA, in which he described ESCA as repressive and against the rule of law. The resolution called for members of the bar to withdraw from all ESCA cases. Those words, repressive and against the rule of law, were to be his constant battle cry against all forms of oppression. He himself faced some of the worst forms of oppression. His detention under the ISA and the sedition charges he faced are but some. I was in court that day when it was fixed for the sentencing of Karpal Singh in his latest sedition trial. I cringed as I heard the state push for a custodial sentence. For me, that epitomized what I always believed to be a persecution rather than a prosecution. Yet, Karpal was his usual cool and dignified self. According to Gobind, he was ready to go to jail. Instead, he was fined 4,000 ringgit, which would disqualify him from his position as Member of Parliament. In a statement to the press when the state filed a cross appeal to enhance his sentence, he said, "They want to send me to jail." But he was not cowed in the slightest. In fact, for all the years that Karpal Singh was held in detention or charged, he was never bitter. Every time someone attacked Karpal, he only grew in stature. He was fearless because he spoke the truth. Karpal lived the immortal words of Walter Scott: "Without courage, there cannot be truth, and without truth, there can be no other virtue." There are many whose spirit would have been broken by the accident which put him in a wheelchair, not Karpal. If Karpal was tall before, he was even taller in his wheelchair. He never lost that twinkle in his eyes, nor his sense of humor. In an interview on his 70th birthday, he said about his disability, laughing, and I quote, "But one of these days," he said, "with stem cell research and so on, you never know, I might just become an athlete and break all sorts of records." In the same interview, he summarized his philosophy of life thus, and I quote, "I think we just have to soldier on, no matter what adversities come our way, because these are to be expected along the journey. So we have to get up and get on." It was said of Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th and last of the living gurus of Sikhism, that he was known for his personal bravery under all circumstances, his persevering endurance amidst difficulties, his advocacy for living a life of honesty, taking the side of truth, and defending one's principles above all. Guru Gobind Singh infused in the hearts and minds of his followers the spirit to fight oppression in order to restore justice, peace, and righteousness, and to uplift the downtrodden people in this world. The Sri Guru Granth Sahib, holy book of the Sikhs, said this, and I translate, "He may be cut apart, piece by piece, but he never leaves the field of battle." Ladies and gentlemen, one can see in this description of the revered Guru Gobind Singh what a true son of his, Karpal Singh, was. What a warrior for justice he was in the true spirit of the Sikh religion. He never left the battlefield of righteousness, and he defended truth to the end. Whilst the Penang state government rightly bestowed honors upon him, the ultimate tribute was in the hordes of people who turned up to bid him farewell last weekend. Someone was apparently overheard saying at his funeral, and I quote, "Sir, if you could see the thousands of people here to say goodbye, more than any ceramah, you would know your life was not in vain. To Gurmit Kaur, his children and grandchildren, and other members of the family, thank you for sharing this wonderful man with us and the nation. You have no idea how much we depended on him. You mourn the loss of your Karpal, who was a wonderful husband, father, and grandfather. And we mourn the loss of our Karpal, our representative, friend, supporter, and true statesman. I am pleased to see that the Karpal Singh spark and fire lives on in his children, whom Gurmit has raised so well with Karpal. We say thank you to his loyal friend, Michael Cornelius, who served him to the end. And we offer our condolences to his family. Ladies and gentlemen, there is only one Karpal Singh, and we will never forget his remarkable life. His legacy will live on forever as an inspiration to all of us.
Terima kasih Saudara Pengerusi Majlis, Saudara Tan Kok Wai, Ketua Ahli Parlimen DAP, Saudara Bukit Siang, Saudara Gobin yang mewakili keluarga mendiang Karpal Singh, Saudara Mak Sabu, Timbalan Presiden PAS, semua dididik kehormat, para duta daripada luar negara, selamat malam dan salam bersih kepada semua. To all the dignitaries gathered here to honor and pay tribute to Karpal, a very blessed evening to everyone. 各位亲爱的马来西亚同胞，大家晚上好。Gajah mati, tinggalkan gading. Harimau mati, tinggalkan belang. Manusia mati, tinggalkan nama. Itu Karpal Singh.我记得文天祥还没有死之前，他最出名这句话，同样要送给Karpal Singh。人生自古谁无死，留取丹心照汗青。I want to thank, on behalf of the DAP, everyone who is gathered here today, all who have come from far and near, who have spent time to attend this memorial and tribute to to our beloved chairman of the DAP, Saudara Karpal Singh. I find this very difficult, just as Govind, because Karpal meant so much to us. Not just as a man. As a man, he was, everyone knows, full of courage, full of energy, full of vitality, but also as a leader. He showed us so much strength, so much idealism, and most of all, so much loyalty. When you are in trouble and you need a friend, you better have Karpal Singh standing beside you. Because he will be loyal and he will be right here till the bitter end, right beside you. No matter what is in front, he will be with you. And I know it from my own personal experience, whether we shared the same cell in Kamunting detention camp when we were both detained under the ISA, or whether he stood with my father, Kit Siang, shoulder to shoulder, sometimes only two of them with Dr. Chen, against the entire might of Barisan Nasional. He never flinched. And of course, as a leader of the DAP, he was one of those leaders whom everyone looked up to, whom everyone could associate themselves with. The virtues, the principles, the idealism. This is what Malaysians hope for in a new Malaysia. I'm going to miss Karpal dearly. I'm going to miss him very much. The cheer, the optimism in his voice, and a constant reminder, doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Lose lah. The most important thing is to fight the right battle. Make sure when you are in a battle, you are in a side of right. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is, because you will go down in history as doing the right thing. And that is the most important of all. He never feared defeat. He never feared defeat. Because if you fear defeat, then you will lose and they will win. The most important is after every defeat, you must bounce back as quickly as you can. That is Karpal Singh. And we talk about loyalty to his friends. He always reminded me never to forget my father. Reminding me as his son never to forget Kit Siang. That showed how loyal a friend he was. Because he told me constantly, again and again, whether in Kamunting detention camp or outside, when we were free, do you know what Kit Siang went through? I saw what he went through. And we were together. I'm sure no words can express the loss of Karpal to Gobind and his family. But I think, and I feel, an acute sense of loss. I think it must be much more for Kit Siang. But we should not only pay tribute and mourn Karpal, we should also celebrate his achievements, his accomplishments, his success. He is said to be a one-man army in a cause that is controlled by Barisan Nasional. Indeed, he is a one-man army, and this army was victorious. We seek not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. We seek not glory for ourselves, but freedom for Malaysia. We seek not the perks and privileges of office, but the joys and laughter of people who are truly liberated. We hope that all of you here can celebrate Karpal's achievements by continuing where he left off. And on behalf of the DAP, we want to assure everyone that we will continue the good fight that Karpal fought his whole life. In the 6 years, Pakatan Rakyat has been in power, especially in Penang. We try to put into practice what we had fought for these 40-odd years. And one of the most important issues that Karpal fought against was to abolish the death penalty. And we can't do that because we are not in power at the federal level. But at least we did something in Penang. Because in the last 6 years, as part of the Penang Pardons Board, we never approved a death penalty. This is the gift of life that DAP and Karpal wants to give. We hope we can give this gift of life to Malaysia. The bursts of freedom, the bursts of hope, especially to the young and the future generations. Remember, we will not allow them to steal our children's future as they have stolen ours. Let us therefore remember Karpal. Remember him well in 2018. Can we do that or not? Can we keep the flame burning or not? Can we honor Karpal with the best gift of all? Of a new Malaysia. Karpal never accepted any honors. He did not want anything for himself. And I think even these tributes, which we appreciate deeply, is nothing compared to the highest honor bestowed by the tears of ordinary Malaysians. And that moved me very deeply, because I've met so many Malaysians, men, women, from all walks of life and all races, shedding tears for a man they never even met because of what he represents. And I think that is the highest honor you can bestow on any person. Let these tears not go to waste. Let Karpal fight continue. And let us give hope to our future generation. It is for them that we fight for. It is for them that Karpal labored for. And I think this is the least we can do. Not only for Karpal, but also for ourselves. Thank you very much. God bless you, my brothers and sisters.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, Saudara Govin dan keluarga, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, Lim Kit Siang dan seluruh pimpinan DAP, tetamu kehormat, seluruh hadirin hadirat, saudara-saudari yang dihormati sekalian. Saudara Karpal Singh adalah seorang yang yakin dengan perjuangannya. Beliau yakin dengan proses demokrasi. Beliau yakin dengan perlembagaan. Karpal Singh bukan manusia hipokrit. Kalau dia tidak bersetuju sesuatu, dia akan mengatakan tidak setuju terhadap partinya sendiri, terhadap rakan-rakan Pakatan Rakyat, sudah tentu terhadap musuhnya. Karpal manusia istimewa. Kita boleh menulis di dinding-dinding, satu Karpal Singh pergi, 100 akan datang. Bagi saya, boleh 100 datang, 200 datang, tak sama dengan Karpal Singh. Karpal Singh adalah Karpal Singh. Beliau harimau, singa dalam parlimen, singa di mahkamah, harimau di mahkamah, tetapi kucing jinak di rumah. Kucing jinak dengan rakan dan kawan. Seorang yang bersopan santun, tetapi dia menjadi harimau, tempat yang perlu dia jadi harimau. Pengalaman saya 3 penggal di parlimen bersama Karpal Singh. Tak ada ahli parlimen lain seberani beliau. Selalunya speaker parlimen menghalau ahli parlimen keluar dari dewan. Karpal Singh menghalau speaker keluar dari parlimen. Inilah peristiwa yang tak boleh dilupai oleh rakyat Malaysia. Apabila seorang speaker difikirkan oleh beliau melalui bukti ia tidak layak berada di kursi itu, Karpal Singh menyebut, kamu tidak boleh duduk di kursi yang mulia itu. Sila keluar daripada dewan yang mulia ini. Saya yakin tak ada lagi manusia seperti ini di parlimen atau di luar parlimen. Siapapun akan merasai kehilangan Karpal. Beliau adalah the lawyer's lawyer, peguam kepada peguam-peguam. Banyak peguam-peguam yang hebat dan bijak, tetapi karakternya tidak seperti Karpal Singh. Kita makin bimbang sebagai rakyat Malaysia. Tak kira kaum dan tak kira agama. Kita bimbang orang seperti kapal Singh ini meninggalkan kita. Saudara-saudari sekalian, banyak proyek-proyek telah diswastakan. Sekarang ini mahkamah mula diswastakan. Bahkan pendakwaan terhadap Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim diswastakan. Oleh itu program privatize ini berterusan sehinggalah bidang kehakiman. Manakan orang seperti kami tidak bimbang? Setiap pemimpin Pakatan Rakyat menghadapi berbagai kes. Saya sendiri 8 kes sedang berlangsung. Ketiadaan kapal amat kurasai. Barangkali orang yang tidak bersifat seperti beliau menegakkan kebenaran tanpa kira apa yang akan berlaku pada dirinya, merasakan kehilangan kapal Singh tidak apa-apa. Tetapi kita dan kita semua yang hadir di sini dan yang tidak hadir merasakan kehilangan yang amat besar. Beliau membela setiap rakyat memerlukan pembelaan. Daripada wanita yang cuba memakai tudung di Singapura, sampailah kepada wanita Melayu, wanita Islam yang dibuang kerja kerana memakai purdah di Perak. Karpal lah orang yang bangun membelanya di mahkamah. Ya, dia ada prinsip tersendiri. Dia ada pegangan tertentu. Prinsipnya, pegangannya, kalau dapat dipatahkan dengan hujah, beliau akan tunduk dan menerima pandangan kawan dan lawan. Inilah sifat peguam kita yang meninggalkan kita. Saya sebut tadi beliau bersikap harimau di mahkamah atau di parlimen. Beliau tidak menjadi harimau di rumah. Kalau tidak ditelan habis Govin dan lain-lain anaknya. Beliau seorang yang pemanja, penjaga, pendidik kepada keluarga dan masyarakat. Inilah manusia yang meninggalkan kita. Manusia yang bernama Karpal Singh. Jasamu tetap dikenang. Perjuanganmu akan diteruskan oleh rakyat Malaysia. Sekian, terima kasih.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera Saudara Govin Singh Dio dan keluarga mendiang Karpal Singh, Saudara Kit Siang, Saudara Guan Ing dan pimpinan DAP, Saudara Mat Sabu dan pimpinan PAS. Saya Azizah keluarga, termasuk keluarga Parti Keadilan dan rakan-rakan, turut menyertai dan majlis ini untuk menyatakan, meluahkan rasa prihatin kita dan rugi kerana kehilangan seorang tokoh dan sahabat. Malam tadi saya di Kuching, jam 1:30 pagi, saya melakar kenyataan. Dan saya jarang membaca kenyataan. Malam ini saya nak baca, ringkas saja. I crafted this at 1:30 in the morning in Kuching last night. Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, just as many of us had gone through in the early hours of 17th of April, when the thunderbolt struck from out of the blue, the unintended wake-up call came with a devastating news. Stunned, shocked, and stupefied. That is how I would sum up my immediate reaction. And after getting hold of myself but still shaking, I tweeted my first expression of condolence. Deep sorrow and devastation over the loss of our indefatigable fighter for justice, Karpal Singh. Later in the day, I sent out a press statement declaring there is none more valiant in life than this great mortal whose body may have perished, but his spirit shall live on with us. Indeed, on this occasion, where we gather to do honor to the memory of our dearly beloved brother Karpal, who, though physically departed, has left us his eternal presence for all the sacrifices he has made, all the labor of love he has given, and all the pain and the suffering he had endured for us. Footfalls echo in the memory down the passage which we did not take, towards the door we never opened into the rose garden. The profound sadness of his departure can never dissipate, for when something that is more precious than the worldly treasures of the world is taken from you, there can never be a replacement. As the nation has lost a most dedicated servant, so too the people have lost a selfless, courageous, and noble defender of their rights and liberties. And even as the legal fraternity has lost one of its sharpest minds, above all, and speaking here personally for myself, I indeed have lost a true friend, kind in words, noble indeed. When in more challenging times he had given me some tongue lashing in public, I knew there was never an iota of malice or ill will, which is why I took it with an open heart, looking at it as affectionate slap on the wrist from an elder brother to his younger sibling. I can never thank him, Karpal, enough for all the help he had given me these last 15 years, and I will never forget those regular visits he paid me during time in Sungai Buloh prison. I certainly cannot even begin to entertain the possibility of repaying him for the kindness and generosity he had shown me. He called me at 6:30 p.m. on the eve of that fateful morning. He told me he was worried about the federal court appeal that was pending. Having been accustomed to the devious machinations of the powers that be, he said he was particularly troubled by the unprecedented speed at which the appeal records were sent to his office. But when I too started sounding agitated and worried, he immediately switched back to his usual cool and confident self, no doubt intending to put me at ease. Such was his magnanimity of spirit that when we push comes to shove, Karpal would always be on your side. So, we ended our long chat with his trademark parting shots. Datuk Sri Anwar, you carry on. Don't worry, I will do my best and I will fight on. You carry on. Seven hours or so later, with those parting words still ringing in my ear, I heard the tragic news. He was a man of unimpeachable moral integrity, absolutely fearless as far as mortals are concerned, forgiving to a fault, and being so full of milk of human kindness, was utterly selfless in helping the oppressed and the victims of injustice. If justice is about fairness, as indeed it is, then Karpal Singh personified it. Hence, he never used underhand tactics or dirty tricks when defending his clients. He always told me, Datuk Sri Anwar, we will fight tooth and nail, but it will be a clean fight. No cheating, no evil schemes. That is why the fact that I was not given a fair trial was so repugnant to him that he vowed to make sure that I would be acquitted and freed, no matter how long that might take. Last Sunday, we witnessed in Penang thousands of Malaysians paying their last respects to Karpal Singh, and there is no doubt in my mind that in his lifetime, worldly titles did not matter to him at all. What would really matter is the high esteem the people have of him. And true to that, a sea of people stretching for miles came on the day of the funeral to send him off, showing their love, affection, and respect for this great man. As Horatio says to Hamlet, upon his death, I now say to my dearly departed brother Karpal, now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. Thank you.
Datuk Sri Anwar, Chief Minister Penang, Kuan Eng, Sabu, Kok Wai, DP leaders, Your Excellencies, fellow Malaysians, saudara-saudara dan saudari-saudari, 亲爱的马来西亚同胞，大家晚间好。After a week of Kapal's passing, Malaysians are still grieving. Correct? After the phenomenal funeral and the 3-day week, where tens of thousands came to Penang to show their love, their respect for Karpal. And I think never in the history of Malaysia has there been such a case of a Malaysian, an ordinary Malaysian, although a member of parliament, who passed away, but millions of Malaysians cutting across race, religion, region, feel a sense of personal loss. And I think that is the measure of the greatness of Karpal Singh. I feel a great sense of personal loss because for 44 years, we have walked together the path for justice, for freedom, for democracy, for good governance in Malaysia. I first met Karpal Singh after I came out from my first Internal Security Act detention. After the May 13 riots, those days we have a lot of support from the people of Malaysia, but very few will be prepared to come forward to stick their necks out, so to say, in order to face the powers that be, to be browbeaten, to be bullied, to be intimidated. But Karpal Singh was different. He came forward and joined the DAP in 1970 in order to be the forefront for the battle for a Malaysian Malaysia. For justice, for freedom, for equality, for democracy in Malaysia. And since then, we have fought together. I remember one of his first cases, it was Fan Yu Ting, where we heard from Nolin where Pan Yu Ting was charged for sedition, and although we have a Queen's Counsel, Karpal Singh was in the forefront in handling the case. Then there was the case of the 14-year-old boy who was sentenced to death, and together we campaigned for his clemency, and we succeeded. And then I was charged under the Official Secrets Act. 5 charges which would have rendered me completely inoperative if I've been given the fullest conviction and sentence. We engaged a Queen's Counsel, Louis Blum Cooper. The government objected. The Attorney General objected to his admission. We appealed, we succeeded, but the hearing was fixed so early that the Queen's Counsel couldn't come. As usual, the tricks at the AG's chambers were played. So Karpal Singh was in the forefront, and he handled the case capably, brilliantly, and although in the High Court I was convicted and sentenced to fines which would have disqualified me as a member of parliament. When we appealed, we succeeded, not in getting an acquittal, but in reducing the sentences to below 2,000 so that I can continue as a member of parliament to continue in our struggle for a new Malaysia, and that is Karpal Singh. I think the greatest tribute you can pay to Karpal is to continue his fight and his dedication. Karpal has said, you can knock out one Karpal Singh, but there will be 100 Karpal Singhs to rise up. Correct? 你可以打倒一个Karpal Singh，但是有100个Karpal Singh会出现，对不对？ We want not 100 Karpal Singhs, we want 1,000 Karpal Singhs. And I think that will be our greatest tribute to the memory of Karpal Singh. His contribution into the battle for justice, for freedom, for democracy, and there is no doubt that Malaysia will be very much poorer if not for Karpal Singh's great contribution in public life, in politics, and the law in the last 4 decades. And I think this is a tribute. We must remember him, and the best way is to continue his battle, that in the next general elections, what Karpal dreamed throughout his life, the Malaysian dream, the Karpal Singh dream, the Malaysian dream, be our dream. Can we agree with that? That in the next general elections, that we make the Karpal Singh dream, the Malaysian dream come true, where there is a restoration of the rule of law, there is a fulfillment of justice, of good governance, and a new Malaysia, a united, harmonious, prosperous Malaysia for all Malaysians, regardless of race, religion, and region. Thank you very much.